for walking us through the impact of this wage hike in Japan. Certainly a long time coming, the largest hike in some 3 decades. What's the impact overall?
Yeah, so the impact that the BOJ is hoping for is that this will sort of shake the economy out of this long-run chronic shortage of demand that it's been seeing for the last 30 years. And the intention is, of course, that improving demand will then keep inflation on target. So the Bank of Japan is hoping that strong domestic demand and stronger wage growth will keep inflation on target, which will then allow it to dial back policy. You've mentioned at the top how we've gotten some good signals coming out of large firms like Toyota that suggest that there is momentum on pay gains. The question I suppose the BOJ will be grappling with these next couple of days is whether small and medium firms will be able to keep up. They have a bit less capacity to raise wages, which is why there's a bit more uncertainty this year than last year and the years beforehand.
And just help me understand what exactly has prompted the wage increase. It seems as if this was a prerequisite for the BOJ before it embarks on this pivot, but it's labour shortages and rising costs that have driven this, right?
In part, yes. Although I suppose you could have argued that that sort of labor shortage, for example, is something that Japan has been struggling with for a couple of decades. So one thing that's played a big role here these last couple of years is that inflation itself has gone up, right? Japan has had a couple of supply shocks that hit the economy. The yen has also weakened considerably, which has pushed up inflation. And that set off a debate domestically about distributing the impact of that inflationary shock. So Japan got inflation, but it didn't get inflation in the way that it wanted. It didn't happen domestically. It happened by way of an external shock. And the hope is now that that external shock shakes the economy out of its longer run stagnation and will make inflation stick. So in parts, the pay gains we're seeing right now are a reaction to inflation already happening. So it's almost as if, it's the inverse of what they were originally hoping for, which again is why there is uncertainty about whether this is actually going to stick.
Right. And from a macro perspective, it's still a fair question to ask, is the Japanese economy really out of the woods, right?
100%. So the Japanese economy is not looking too well if you look at the recent run of data. For one, the real economy has been struggling. Real household consumption, for example, has been falling for the better part of a year, which is because wage gains, although they have improved, they're still trailing inflation. So real wages are down. Domestic investment spending and exports are similarly struggling, which means that the economy is unlikely to see a lot of growth this year. The other bit is, again, the uncertainty around inflationary momentum, as we spoke earlier. Again, the BOJ was banking on better domestic demand, better wage growth to endogenously create inflation within Japan. But what we've gotten instead was this external shock, which pushed up inflation. And again, the hope is that this will shake up things domestically, but it's a tall order. Overall, it's very hard to say that the economy is really in a good place right now. It's not in recession, but it's also not far from a recession, which is, again, why the BOJ is hesitant to move too soon, in our view.